Good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar. It's another session in our legal technology webinar series, which we started last year. I'm Hella Schwartz-Grossman, Marketing Manager at Worldox. And before we get started, there are a few housekeeping items. The webinar will be recorded and the link will be emailed to you afterwards. Everyone is muted right now, but if you have any questions, go ahead and type them into the questions pane and we'll address questions at the end of the webinar. Today's session is a roundtable discussion on a topic we're frequently asked about. What is a workspace and what is the difference between workspaces and favorite matters, and what is a project? To help us provide answers and suggestions to these questions, we are joined by several of our inner circle bars, and I'm pleased to introduce our panelists, Frank Jones and Sandy Johnson, both from Legal Software Connection, Rick Barnauer of SciTech, John Heckman of Heckman Consulting, Bill Baker and Mayan Swearing of Baker Caden Solutions, and Peter Brannigan and John Rock of Docs Advisors. And our moderator today is Rebecca Satin, CIO of Worldox. And so we're almost ready to start. So thank you in advance for the attention you'll be giving the webinar today. And Rebecca, here you go.
Thank you, Hella. And thanks to all of our VARs who have joined us today, who I think collectively, you guys have over 100 years of experience in implementing Worldox. Again, because Worldox can be customized in so many ways, this is part of the reason that we always recommend to our clients that they work with one of our VARs to make sure that they get everything set up in such a way that it enables them to work most efficiently. So today we're talking about workspaces, and one of the things that is a little bit difficult about workspaces, and especially workspaces and projects, is a little bit because they are virtual. They are virtual items within the Worldox software. I have a little video that I'm going to show that explains how to create a workspace and how to create projects within a workspace. And I will narrate as we go through. Let's see. Okay, so favorite matters. Your favorite matters, which follow you to every part of the software, these allow you to access your favorite matters and their contents very quickly through that pane on the left-hand side. Workspaces are very similar, only you have to subscribe to them the way that I'm showing on the screen right now. Right now I'm selecting a specific matter, and it's going to create a workspace. And I want to give it a more friendly name, so I'm going to call it Fifth Avenue Real Estate Purchase. And there is my workspace. And I can use it the same way as a favorite matter by double-clicking on it to actually access that matter. But with a favorite matter, favorite matters are only going to be there as long as the documents within them remain on your favorite lists, which is basically 30 days. Now, right now, I'm creating a project by right-clicking on a workspace, and that's going to allow me to very easily create a project in this environment. And right now, the project has no documents in it, but here, I'm going to go ahead and put some documents into that project. So I'm selecting the documents, I'm dragging them to the project, and now they are going into that project. So if I double click on that project, now you can see the contents of it. Now, just so that everyone understands, those documents did not actually move. They stayed in their original location. A project is a little bit like an iTunes playlist. Basically, your songs stay where they are, but you create a list of pointers to the songs that you want to listen to. So that's that's kind of how a project works. It's a virtual collection of pointers to your documents. So one of the great things about projects also is that once you've created them, you can actually just type the name of your project in the find space in the upper right and find your project that way, as well as finding them within your workspaces. But so your favorite matters, as the documents that you work with day to day fall off of your favorite files list, so will those favorite matters drop off of that list. But if you create a workspace, if it's a matter that you might not necessarily work in constantly, then but you still want to keep track of the activity, then you can create a workspace for it. The workspace also gives you the ability to very easily create projects from it, and also it gives you the ability, like basically the workspace will be there all the time unless you get rid of it, as opposed to favorite matters that are only there as long as you're working on the files within that matter for that period of time. So I hope that that has described what workspaces, projects, and favorite matters are. And I'm going to move on and let Sandy give you some, sorry about that. I'm going to let Sandy give you a little bit more information about some other ways that you can use workspaces.
Thanks, Rebecca. So here, what we did, this is actually a client site where they had ProLaw and were having a bit of trouble going into Worldox and not having their folders, okay? I call that the F word, you know, not having your folders. So as I worked with these guys, I thought, you know, I wonder, because they do have a short doc type list, not that it's necessary, but in this case, it worked out well. What we did was we created what's called a view. That is simply a search that is done when you're in that particular workspace. So here, I renamed their client, obviously, Mickey Mouse Dance Company. That protects the innocent, as we know. But here, we created a search for almost every type of document type that they had. So when you double click on Mickey Mouse, you get everything. You double click on client reporting, you get whatever is assigned to client reporting, which is a doc type. And these views can be created globally, which is what we did at this site. So no matter what you subscribe to, you will get this list of views. So under Smith Jones at the bottom, we can't see it, but you would see the exact same views. So Rebecca, if you could go to the next slide, please. Thank you. Now, if you wanted to create them individually, they can also be created individually. And it's not difficult, it's just you have to remember just a couple little tricks. So in the client matter, you have to code it with the pointy brackets. I have no clue what those are really called, so I call them pointy brackets. So we got client, we got matter, and in the doc type field, you put in what you want to search on. It could be one doc type, it can be multiple doc types. So at firms that have a huge doc type list, they might want to combine a few doc types, maybe memos, notes, firm information, you know, and call it one thing that is like client info. But you fill it in like so, you go down to options, you save the template, and we simply, to group them all together, call it views, and this one is transcripts for trial transcripts. And then If you are a manager, you can save it for everyone. And then that actually creates the view. And it is, for this firm, this is how they are using Worldox. It was a great feature for them.
That is great. I wish I had known about that when I was still working at a law firm. I think that would have helped a lot of people.
So
People
Sandy,
that have an issue with the F word.
Yes.
is it fair to say that at that firm, Sandy, who I know who it is, that the attorneys in particular, but not just attorneys, all staff people, could really rely on Workspaces being their default pull-out tab on the left, and literally just go to the Workspaces, double-click the items, and expect to get what they are going to get, but without having to think, without having to bring up a search template. It's just 1, 2, 3, done.
Yes. And that's why for this particular firm, because they were struggling, I thought this is going to be almost the same as, not the same, but same type structure as ProLaw. They're used to that. And like Frank said, you don't really have to think except to subscribe to a workspace, and then everything's there for you. So it's a great feature.
Thank you, Sandy. And I think we're going to move on and go to John Rock. So you guys will have to let me know if you can hear this.
Nothing yet.
Can't hear it, Rebecca.
You did hit play, right?
Yeah, let's see.
It's a pretty picture, though.
Yes, it is.
But John, you
try
have
this
you have
again.
such a narrator's voice anyhow. I'd rather see you do it live.
Thanks, Frank, for your confidence. Fortunately, I just this second found the script.
I
So,
have all
Rebecca,
the
it doesn't look like it's, oh, there goes the little pointy finger. Is that your pointy? Nope.
That's my pointy finger.
Right.
I'm trying to get it to play.
Okay.
It
I'm
did
so
play
glad I
in my
just did.
test. Yep. All righty.
It's a still photo. It's not a movie. Anyway, so
Let me try something else, actually. Bear with me. Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain.
John, what are we going to see?
what are we going to see?
Here we go. And we have no sound, so you can narrate.
Okay, so one of the many ways that I use Worldox projects is with a Windows Explorer integration. And this is a feature with the Worldox GX4 version, and it's a handy way to get documents from an outside source, USB drive, or a shared network folder into Worldox quickly. Care must be used with this process as it makes a copy of the files into Worldox, leaving the original files intact. Hold off on that, pause for 1 second. Make sure you address this potential dual file issue with your client. Best practices is always to move files into Worldox. When you right-click on any Windows folder, you have the option to save to Worldox. This will launch a new profile card in Worldox for you to complete the metadata information. Remember, you get one profile card for all documents in the Windows folder, so you may want to have a doc type called to be profiled or imported, so that you know that when you see these documents at a later date, they need to be profiled for better accuracy. I also use the comments field to describe where these documents came from, and you can assign them a unique category. You just want to have a way to note something unique to describe where they came from to better assist Worldox users in the future. All right, let her roll and let's see what we got here. So this is the one profile card you'll get. I added comments that say Williams Winery bulk files import. I have the client Williams Winery, and I have the doc type called to be profiled. And I've also created a category called imported. Are we rolling on the video? Good.
Yep.
So once you fill out all the information on the profile card, click OK. That'll give you confirmation that the files were copied to Worldox. The last step is the critical step, because here's where you can make a project out of the files that you just copied. So you get to name this project whatever you wish, click OK to save it. Now in Worldox, I always create a new search tab so I can go forward with new searches. Now I'm searching by the client. I see all the files listed below, and I see the project at the top of the list. So we have two items. We've got the project as well as all the files that are in it. We see the name of the project. Hold on, pause for 1 second, Rebecca. In the second document down, we see the name of the document, which is retainer agreement. We also see right below that line, the comments field that said Williams Winery bulk files. And then underneath of that is the critical part, because when you're looking at these files, this will tell you exactly where they came from. And this is Worldox generated. So it tells me that I've copied these files from C client files, Williams Winery, building lease, and it's in the agreement folder. So over on the right, I see to be profiled under the doc type, but this is a way for me to easily ID where the document came from so I can reprofile it to a more accurate doc type. It also allows me to search all these documents in this client file for, say, the word lease in this list, and it will come up with all the lease documents. If I search for the word agreement, it will give me all the documents in that agreement folder. Go ahead and hit play for me, please. So there's a lot of information on these files that are useful moving forward to help us identify them. And again, I select the file. I know that it's a lease. Now I can reprofile it. And now it's accurately profiled into Worldox. Up on the top there, you'll see there's the Williams bulk file, project file. If you double click that, it opens all the files in the list that were in that project. If you come over to Workspaces, you see Williams bulk file import project. You double click that, and there's all the files in that project. So not only can you find the files by going to the client, you can also go to them through Workspaces and see your recent projects as well. Frank, you got your wish, narrated specifics, especially just for you.
John, that was great. And by the way, folks, all of us Inner Circle people, John taught us a trick that we had never thought about. We all know that feature to be used commonly for discovery. You get a CD and you got to bring all these files in. He's figured out a way to do that with legacy documents at new customer sites as a quick way to bring those in. I thought that was an ingenious comment. And John, you had an opinion about that. What should you do after that if you're going to use it for that technique?
If you're using it for legacy files, again, like my note in the very beginning, you're copying files, you're not moving them. So we now have two files. We have one set in Worldox and we have one set in the legacy folder. Make sure you teach your staff members how to go back and rename that folder Williams Winery files and make a note that they've been profiled into Worldox or move them into another location so that those aren't in a production folder that anyone would mistakenly use moving forward. Or hit the delete button.
Well, thank you, John. And
Thank you.
Up next, Anne has some additional things to say about projects.
I do. Now, if you've used John's method, you may not see this description, these dialogues, but if you move or copy documents from the navigation panel, say moving from your My Documents folder or elsewhere, and you want to batch those documents because you can't add to a project from this file move or copy dialog, but afterwards, you get a pop-up asking you if you want to open a new list to display those files. So when you get that, then when you open the list, you can select the documents and drag them into your workspaces, into your project, where you want them to be, or otherwise add them through the tab at the bottom. Now, it may be that you don't have the option after you do a file move or copy to open them in a new tab. And if that's the case, you may have selected the Don't Show Again option or checkbox on the dialog. And you can go to the next slide then, Rebecca. Here, if you want to put that option back, so you have the ability to open the moved or copied documents in a new list, then you just go to the Worldox edit menu at the top, preferences, confirmation dialog options as you see here, and then you're going to change both show copy results and show move results if you want that pop-up. So even if you click on that Don't Show Again box, you can set the option back or return the option that you had dismissed. So, and then you can open them in a new list and copy them or drag them to a project. Okay, and that's my tip for working with projects.
That's a great one, Van, because it's not a situation where you're prompted to create a project. It's just a great use for creating a project. So thank you. And I think I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a while so you can just get to see our panelists for a little while. And let's see. So we had a few other people who had some additional things to say. I think John Heckman, you had some interesting tips about different situations where you might want to use the project feature.
Right. Thanks, Rebecca. As Rebecca said, starting out, you can think of projects as an iTunes playlist, or more generally, any kind of list, table of contents, or whatever. A lot of people use workspaces and projects interchangeably, so it's also useful to recall that projects are what exist within a workspace. So, as I said, any kind of list or table of contents. So, for example, a list of exhibits in pleadings, court filings, depositions, similar documents. You've got a list of exhibits. That list can be set up as a project. So you click on the project and you not only get your table of contents as a single page, but you get all the documents that are attached. Similarly, closing binders in a real estate transaction, which is equivalent to a table of contents in the binder. Or possibly a list of court filings, which you could use to compare the filings to what is actually listed online and make sure you've got everything corresponds. You might also have a list of boilerplate options, precedents, or other resources. So this lets you have them all in one place. For example, a lot of firms have a forms library that sometimes can have hundreds and hundreds of documents in them. The forms that you actually use on a day-to-day basis is probably a lot more restricted. So if you created a project for those forms, you wouldn't have to sort through the hundreds of different kinds of forms in a forms bank. Another possible use is client intake forms or documents. Many firms have a list for client intake of all the documents they require. You could set this up as a project, again, to see all the intake documents in one place. And more generally, anything that you can think of or be compared to a table of contents. A project is a table of contents of something. And there's lots of different applications. I'm sure people will be able to think of their own. That's about it. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Now, Bill, I think you actually had a more specific example. John mentioned using it for precedents, but I think you had a specific situation where that happened, where Baker Cadence came in and really helped a firm.
Yeah, Rebecca, it's a real life story. We're installing Worldox in a firm in Surrey, British Columbia, and in the family law department, the partner there was virtually in tears because she couldn't find her subfolders any longer that she had in Windows, where she had all of her precedents or precedent documents. So what we did was we used projects and took the documents and put them into project folders for her, and labeled them by the type of precedent that she was looking for. And we even were able to nest projects within projects so that she could easily find them. And with all of that, it cleared up the problem, and she was happy with Worldox. So it was from tears to smiles, and it was a great experience.
I think between all of us, we've all seen situations like that where people are panicking until you show them, oh, there's a feature that will help you do exactly what's going to fit your need.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Actually,
exactly.
Yep. One situation that I remember from my days at the law firm, I remember when the federal courts first started mandating electronic filing, and everybody was in a panic about how they were going to do this, and maybe they need to exit out of Worldox and export the documents out of Worldox so they could easily upload them to the court. But what we did was we made sure that Worldox was integrated with the browser, and we had them create a project with all of the stuff that had to be filed, including the exhibits and everything. All of that was in a project, and that way they could go to the court website, click on the browse button, find the project, and here are all the files that have to be filed to the court. So that was another real life example of a good use for projects.
Well, Rebecca, you just reminded me of something. If I could share something that I've seen firms have that as a way to distribute their mail. So the mail that's coming in and being scanned, it's a perfect use to have that stored in projects and then let the attorneys or whoever's responsible to see that mail get to it easily through a single project, maybe of each day or something that contains the mail scanned that day for them.
And something I think a lot of people don't realize in a project, if you can actually, it's scary, but you can hit the delete button. And what'll happen is if it's in a project, it'll say, do you want to remove it from the project or do you want to delete it? So with the mail, they could, delete it. Yes, remove it from the project. Now they've seen that and they can move on to the next document.
That's brilliant. It turns it into sort of a workflow situation.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Rebecca, I have a combination too, where we use Workspaces and projects. Instead of doing a precedence or exemplar profile or have a cabinet, instead we just made projects for the exemplar documents, and then they could create a project under the workspace and then copy that or move those documents into the specific project under the workspace. So while they were working on that particular client matter, they could see all the exemplar documents that they wanted to use.
Mm-hmm.
Rebecca, I don't know, what did you have? I was going to talk about 2 features on projects. Did you have any of this? That's one little slide that I sent you. I just wanted to make sure I wasn't jumping out of order. If not, that's okay. What I was going to mention is another way I sometimes think about projects is either as a way to document something or as a way to handle a workflow, kind of like what Frank was saying. But Lily mentioned those. You could say, what are the things that we are going to file with the court? What are the things that were in this packet that we sent to the client? What are these things? By creating a project, you can make a record on this date. This is what was provided to the client, and it keeps it out there so you know what documents were in that packet. The other is you could create projects that were, for example, workflows like the mail coming in, or you could say, here are the documents that the attorney needs to sign when they finally get back in the office on Monday. And you could put the documents into that project. A project doesn't have to be static. Things can go in and come out if you want them that way. But that way you could have somebody, they just have a button to go to look at that project, and there's everything that people have put in for them to review across all the different cases. It doesn't have to be for just one case.
Hey, Rick, that's such a great idea. The thought of a record, never thought of that. That's awesome, because you could then actually secure that project file in a way that others couldn't accidentally remove that record from the system. That's a brilliant idea.
It's my one for the day.
That's a good one.
So let me see.
We're getting a few questions come in too.
Okay. We can address some of the questions.
Okay, we have one is for Sandy. She's asking, can you create a view that's not global? In other words, a view that's specific to just one workspace.
Unfortunately, no. The views, because you're coding it by client matter, anything you subscribe to will get that view. That's on my wish list too. Yeah.
Actually, we don't mind. I actually had to solve this recently for a client. So we had more seasoned attorneys that were used to shucks, as they call them, which I didn't know about.
Yeah.
But that's a grouping of documents. So in their world, they wanted shucks. But there's only a few of these seasoned attorneys, and the rest of the people don't want that view. So what I did was I created views specific to that attorney group, and I called them their kind of views. And then through security, I could attach that only those people saw that particular set of views. And then the rest of the attorneys who wanted a different view, then they could have their own type of view as well, separate. So we have a default for the company, and then we've got the specific ones by a particular group of attorneys. Because one of the things we'll see is that there's a lot of ways to do things in Worldox, but emotionally, to some people, one view is very important. So if you get an attorney that's struggling, and then this solves their problem, even though it's very like another way to do it, the fact they can do it, like Frank said and Sandy said for that pro law example, that means the world to them, and it makes them happier or more satisfied. But you can actually group it by security groups for different audiences.
But the question was per client matter though, right? Did I misunderstand it? I just want to make sure.
Well, the question, let's see. It was more specific to one workspace. So
Okay.
yeah, client and matter.
Okay.
That's true. Sorry. Yeah.
Oh, no. That was a great
that
idea.
was a great, yeah. I hadn't thought of that either, Peter. So this is why it's very important to work with a Worldox reseller if you're thinking about reconfiguring your system, because they have all kinds of brilliant ideas that they've come across based on their vast experience working with a multitude of Worldox clients.
I think that's super important, and to know that we all share amongst ourselves. So we're a very close-knit community, and we learn a lot from each other. I mean, that's another brilliant, Peter, that I would have never thought of. Kudos to you.
No problem. The only other one I have, if you don't mind me throwing in one more, is, the sweetest sound to any person is the sound of their own name, right? Everybody, if you do it in a room full of people and you whisper somebody's name, they'll turn right away. So one of the views I like is the .me view. So when they get into a particular matter, they just click .me in the workspace, and that shows them their files. because often that's all they care about are the ones they've done. So across all the types, they just say, here's my stuff. So it's a good view to have in the workspaces, a me view or my files view or whatever you want to call it, but me is simple.
Right, so it's important, Sandy was right, I mean, in the sense that they would appear everywhere, but it's in no way limiting that they can each create their own that will then appear within their own structure. So yeah, there's a lot you can do with this, right?
Yes.
I'm wondering if we have any more questions, and I'm going to go ahead for the time being and.
Well, can I suggest one more thing? Because in regards to this, when we get into all these projects, I think the natural thing that some people may begin to ask is now you have all these project files and they're on the file lists, they're appearing in places throughout the system. And I think it would be nice to show Rebecca or someone to explain how you can then filter those out of the list easily, maybe even with a single click, so that you're not always overwhelmed by all these project files that may be appearing in the interface. Anybody want to tackle that one?
Well, you did a pretty good job just now of explaining what it is, but the way that you actually do it, if that's what you're getting at, when you create bookmarks in Worldox, this is a feature. I know we've featured this in our monthly newsletter before, but this was something that I didn't know about until I joined the company. But you can, when you filter for something, first of all, when you use the filter that's at the bottom of Worldox, you can either filter to include specific things or you can filter to exclude certain things. And if you want to exclude, you click on the plus sign to turn it into a minus sign. And once you've done that, you can filter out project files so that they don't appear in your list. Once you have your filter set up, you can bookmark that filter and it'll prompt you, do you want to bookmark this list that you're looking at, or do you want to bookmark just the filter? And in this case, you can bookmark just that filter that excludes projects from what you're seeing on your screen. And then you'll always have that button up at the top that if you have a list that's got a ton of projects in it and you only want to see the actual Worldox files, you can just click on that bookmark and it will filter out all of the projects.
Yeah,
is that what you were getting at?
It is. In our world, folks, what we've come across over the years is that we create a lot of search templates. Some people call them find templates. They're the same. We create a lot of these for people. People create their own. They tend to bookmark everything and put it, pin it to the bookmark bar, I think is the correct term. We've learned to maybe not do that quite so frequently and now allow the use of the bookmark flyout tab in the navigation panel. But then getting back to what Rebecca's saying, then if you consciously only pin to the bookmark those that are particularly useful workflows, we have things that say, mail only, no mail, no projects, projects only, one-click things that then from that bookmark bar, there's only a handful of items displaying, and you can easily click them to reduce or to enlarge the lists in very purposeful ways. We should do a whole class on that one day, Rebecca.
On bookmarks?
Bookmarks, yeah.
Strategic use of those bookmarks and filters.
Filters in particular. Yeah, I use the bookmark for exclude email all the time.
Yes, me too.
Yes. Yes.
And I think a lot of I was just going to say, I think a lot of people tend to forget about the filters. I don't know why, but maybe because it's at the bottom of the screen. But if I'm doing review training, I'm like, now let's go down and filter. When did that get there? And so it is a great feature, the filters.
I also use it for because Microsoft Word used to be files that ended in .doc, but now they end in .docx. So I created one that, filters out just Word documents, but it'll take both of those instead of the drop down at the top, because that'll only get one or the other.
Yes.
So.
Right. So, I mean, the typical thing about Worldox is it's so awesome, right? We all know that. We love it. It can do so many things. But to the new user and even long-term users, there are times when it appears to be daunting. There's so much going on. So I think a role of many of us in the, high-end reseller channel is to help simplify this, to take all these features and turn them into one-click type, very useful end results. And I don't think on their own, the average end user site would probably expect to figure that out on their own, to be honest with you. So I love doing these webinars. I hope it's useful to the community.
Yeah.
And in part, to help solve the problem, you have to know what the problem is. For us, it's always, what is your workflow? What do you do? They don't know. You may not know about the ability to scan your mail and make it available to each attorney by clicking a button on the bookmark bar. You don't know that until you identify what their workflows are, what their processes are, and then try and minimize the paper going back and forth and utilize the software to manage your processes rather than mechanically.
That's so true. They wouldn't know either that if you have a list of 500 on the screen, they just take it for granted that's the list, not even realizing they could filter that in the ways we're talking about. That's so spot on, John.
And again, that's why we do so much in the way of training and offer so much training and surveys to survey the users to not only where their challenges and struggles are, what do they like, what they don't like, what do they know, what they don't know, are you familiar with these features? And then we can have a starting point for where to begin to identify those problems and solve them through the Worldox software.
Yeah, I was going to say that for people who have had Worldox installed for many years, it's really advisable to have a hints and tricks session to show their users some of the newer features and things that we have learned, and to be able to transfer it over to the people within the firm, because most of the people stay with what they've originally learned, don't learn all the new capabilities within Worldox.
All right, one of the things that I've found useful that I probably should actually do more of is to make up a list of, say, a dozen or so tips, and then have the firm administrator mail out a tip twice a week and call it tip of the week or something after training. So for the 6 weeks, month or 6 weeks after refresher training, all the users get an additional tip, which serves to reinforce what they've learned in the training.
It's a good idea.
I think actually, just during the past year with the pandemic, I think it has presented a new need to learn more about Worldox and to learn how to use it in some different ways, just because everybody's had to learn so many different ways of working. The example about scanning mail, for instance, I mean, that might not have been that important a little more than a year ago, but now all of a sudden it takes on new importance. So
we're finding that most of the attorneys are still working from home, and the administrative and assistants are going into the office and doing the mail. So whereas you could put mail on someone's desk, now you have to come up with a solution how to get it to them. And that's one of the solutions that we've come up with in these new times, to use the software to make their work a little more efficiently. And you're right, we've had to learn how to, we're not able to pass paper back and forth anymore, not as easily as we did before. So how do we do that? Well, we're not going to email it to you. We're going to email you a link. We're going to send you a link or send you a doc ID, something, but have Worldox manage the documents rather than passing them back and forth again.
I think when we're all done with this, sorry.
No, I was just saying we actually have several questions that maybe we could take a look at as well. I think one of them came in when John was presenting with the folder, and somebody asked, is there a limit on how many files that can be in a folder that you copy, move over into Worldox, into the projects and the workspaces?
That I'm not sure of. I haven't run against an obstacle like that yet. But I know in certain situations, Worldox has 1,000 file limit. And I'm saying, if anything, that might be the limit, but I've yet to come across one or know of one at this point.
So I think the limit is more practical than anything else. I have a firm that processes emails from an automated email, basically a parking fine system. I get about 8,000 emails a month, all of which go into the same directory, at least initially. After you get about 12 or 15,000 emails in a single directory, or any documents in a single directory, Worldox starts getting a little funky. But I've been limiting it to a month for each set of emails, and that runs to about 6,000 to 8,000 documents, and they haven't had any problems. Although, of course, manipulating those 6,000 to 8,000 documents, that's another issue entirely.
Well, the technical limit is 65,000, but you're right. The practical limit is reasonably in the several thousands. You get more than that, and it's too many to be working with.
Okay. All right. We had somebody ask if you delete from a file from a project, it does not delete the file in the Worldox directory, and it does not.
That is correct.
That's correct.
That was one.
Well, if you delete the document when you're looking at it through the lens of the project, the document will be deleted. So, but I think it's that question about if the document is removed from the project.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and it's very clear in its warnings about that when you do that. So you shouldn't be alarmed at trying. I think you'll find out that it gives you proper guidance when you attempt to do that.
Right, and if you delete a project, the documents are untouched.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then we had another question. If you are saving a new document, can you send it to the project at the same time that it's being saved?
You can now in GX4.
Yeah.
That's one of the big additions in GX4. At the bottom of the screen, there's Save to Project, which will open up the workspace on the left. So you have had to subscribe to the workspace, and the project has to be there. But then you can just pick it. It'll say right at the bottom, add it to this project, and you're good to go.
I think you can create a workspace from there now too, right? If you subscribe, then you can actually create a project during a file save. Didn't used to be able to, but I think that's new. Yeah.
You
but
can.
You do have to subscribe, can you?
But
cool.
The main thing to point out here actually is that it is new with GX4, but it's a more recent version of GX4. So if you have GX4 and you don't see that in your save screen, it means you have to update to the latest version of GX4 code, which is another thing that this group can help with.
All right, let's see what other. Let's see. Oh, this was something that John mentioned. He mentioned that you can compare a project to a table of contents. But how do you see the table of contents? So
the table of contents is the list of documents in the project.
Mm-hmm.
So if you think of a table of contents, and then the ability, essentially each element in the table of contents is hyperlinked to the document. You click on it, and you get the list of documents, and then you can work with those documents and do whatever you need to do with them from there.
Thank you. I think we kind of covered most of the questions. I don't know if anybody has anything else they would like to,
I think I see another question that we might have missed. Somebody has asked, and this was something that John covered, but I just want to be sure that it's clear to the person who asked. They asked whether when you're creating projects by right-clicking on a folder, how does it handle subfolders? And do you want to take that, John?
So when you right-click a parent folder, it will include all folders and all documents in all subfolders underneath of that parent folder. When you go to save the profile card, it's going to give you one profile card for one client, matter, doc type, author, and typist, and you can add a category, and you can also put comments in there as to what you're doing. Once you've clicked OK to that, and it copies the documents, the next step is it will give you the option to name and create a project, which you always want to do. Back into Worldox, after those files are copied, in the comments field, it will list in the comments field the path from which that file and every other file was copied. So in my example, I had, it was copied from client files, Williams Winery, lease agreements, and then a doc type folder called maybe correspondence. So it will tell you in the comments field where it actually came from.
And on that note, a best practice, if who's ever asking, if it has to do with discovery, getting large quantities, which very well could be the case. That's why that feature was developed. The best practice would then be to create a separate cabinet, create a different directory hierarchy deeper than client and matter, so that all of that is pointed into that cabinet, which in turn has in common the client matter. So to the end user, they can do a search of both and get both outputs, but you then have an ability to separate the data in a more tangible way for a large discovery project.
Thank you, Frank, for saying that, because it's one of my biggest pet peeves to see discovery data mixed in together with work product, because discovery data has completely different security requirements. So thanks for that. And I think we're actually, I wasn't even sure we were going to make it through the hour, but I think we're getting pretty close to an entire hour on this topic. So if we don't have any more questions, Rick, did you have something?
I just wanted to mention, with those cabinets that you and Frank were talking about, if you have a separate discovery cabinet, in the main work product cabinet, you could create a project that was pointing to the discovery cabinet area for part of the files, so that there was actually an entry in the main client area that people would see, oh, there is discovery stuff, click on this and they could get over to it.
That's a good idea.
Very good idea.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's 2 for me today.
That's one over your quota, Rick.
I'm way over my quota.
Well, that's where the name Dr. Bernauer comes from.
That's right.
So I'll turn it back over to you, Hella.
Okay, so unless anybody else has any more pointers for anybody, then it doesn't look like it. Then we'll just say thank you to all of you, our panelists, and helping us give some really good tips on how to take advantage of the workspaces and projects, and really get the most out of them. We are going to post a recording of this webinar, and we'll post it on our website along with where all the other recordings are posted from past webinars. You will anyone who attended today will get the link, and we thank you all for joining us today, and we hope you'll that we'll see you again at one of the future webinars that we usually have on Fridays. If you missed any of the past webinars, go take a look on the website. And thank you. Have a good weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye,
Thanks,
everybody.
everyone.
Bye-bye.
See y'all later.
Bye.